We're talking about sex, and we want to welcome Viviane in a great way. Let's test something all together before going to work. We're gonna scream. We're gonna scream all together. The name's like an orgasm. It's a group orgasm. It's a new concept. The name of Viviane. At 3. Well, we simulate it, of course.
Or maybe
1, 2, 3. Viviane! Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. How are you? You sounded good. All right. So, I don't know if you heard the song that I was playing. Wait, sorry. Ooh, yeah. Let's Do It. Song by Cole Porter. Anybody know the song? Yeah? Okay. I love this song. I think it's fun. And the reason why I wanted to start with this song is because everybody knows what it's about, but it's never really explicitly said. And that's the way it is with sex a lot of times. And sometimes this censorship is poetic and even funny, but generally it's actually anything but positive. All right. So my name is Viviane Morey, and in 2012, my brother Stefan, who's here, wave. Yeah, I came with my entourage. My brother and I founded a festival, a sex-positive festival called La Fête du Slip. Those are lovely graphics. And so it's a sex-positive festival, and we do this alongside our regular jobs. We both work, and we do this with no money at all. So probably the question that we are asked most often is, why do you do it? And so I'm going to try to take the opportunity to try to answer that question this morning, to share with you where my heart lays, to talk to you a little bit about sex positivity, and how I believe that this can make the world a better place. So, what does it mean to be sex positive? I'm just curious, has anybody heard this term before? Yes? Okay, well that's a good question. So what does it mean to be sex positive? Well, let's start with the obvious. It's the opposite of sex negative. That doesn't really help, does it? So, let's just think about words that we use. Words like cunt, dick, asshole, bitch. Well, yeah, she said that. I mean, you wouldn't call somebody you're angry with a knee, or go, oh gee, what an elbow. Would you? No, you wouldn't. And just think of the situations when we say like, oh, we're fucked, or we're screwed, or that sucks. What does this tell you about how our society considers sex, or the parts of our bodies that are connected with sex? Negative, right? Yeah, exactly. And we see these words and we use these expressions because we view sexuality as something that is shameful, sinful, animalistic, and we assume that there are good ways and normal ways of having sex and that there are bad ways. Yeah, I see people nodding, so yeah, this makes sense to you too. Okay, and our sex negative view tells us that because sex is linked to the body, it's not rational, it's not logical, it can't be contained, it's dangerous, it's something to be feared or even endured. So, what is sex positivity? I'm going to read a short quotation by somebody that I like very much, somebody called Charlie Glickman, who's a sex educator, who's talking about sex positivity. So he says, one common definition of sex positivity is that it's the belief that sex is good. However, it can be more useful to reframe our definition of sex positivity from sex is a positive thing to working towards a more positive relationship with sex. Now, there are several reasons why this small shift is actually very important. First, it acknowledges that sex is neither good nor bad. Just like food, the benefit or harm comes from what you do and in how it affects you. Second, sex is a subjective experience, and we each have a different relationship to it. And third, and probably most importantly, it allows space to say that our relationship with sex can always have space for improvement. And that's why I really like his definition. So being sex positive means recognizing that sexuality is a really important part of what it means to be a human being. And it's recognizing that a healthy sex life free of shame is a basic human right. And that regardless of nationality, sex, age, gender, state of health, we are all entitled to this. And we're entitled to live our sex lives free of judgment, shaming, imposition, exploitation, and repression. So, this seems pretty easy and pretty swell, right? Yeah. So how do you go from what I've been talking about to a better world? How does that work? So this is a little lesson in sex positivity. So I'm going to get you to do things. Don't worry. It's just going to be in your head. So the first thing I'd like you to consider is the impact of sex and gender-related violence in our lives and in our world today. Now, bless you. How I want you to do this is if you are a woman, if you're a lesbian, if you're gay, if you're transgender, I want you to right now think of the last time you changed your behavior to avoid sexual harassment or assault. And when I mean change your behavior, I mean anything from changing your outfit, deciding not to wear those heels, or not to act that way, take a taxi because you could have easily walked home, change sides of the streets, anything at all. Yeah, and I see some heads nodding, so yeah. And straight men out there, I want you to think about this too. But if nothing comes to your mind, I want you to take a moment to realize how privileged you are. Because I guarantee that everybody else in this room knows what I'm talking about. Sex and gender-related shame kills. Did you know that in Switzerland, gay men are 2 to 5 times more likely to commit suicide than their heterosexual counterparts? That to me is a shocking number. Sex and gender-related shame also leads to lower self-esteem, and low self-esteem is a very important part of a factor in risk-taking sexually. So it leads to higher rates of sexually transmitted diseases, namely AIDS. So those are just two short, small examples of how sex or gender-related shame impacts our lives. Seriously. Now, on a lighter tone, the second thing I want to do this morning is I want to challenge the idea that sex is a natural act. What? What did I just say, right? I'm going to say this again. I want to challenge the idea that sex is a natural act. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Back in 1973, so this is not new stuff, guys. This just goes back. The thing is nobody talks about it. Back in 1973, two sociologists called William Simon and John Gagnon came up with a theory to talk about and think about sex and gender that are called, the concept is called sexual scripts. And what sexual scripts are kind of like implicit or explicit scenarios to, that define what is desirable from what is perverse. You following me on that? Yeah? Okay. And so if I were to lay out before you the archetypical sexual script of a heterosexual encounter in Europe or in the United States, it would be something like this. It would be kissing, petting, foreplay, penetration, ejaculation, and just be careful, I'm saying ejaculation, not orgasm, okay, just ejaculation, because there is a difference between these two things, all right, for both men and women. And, we'll just think about that a little bit. Okay, so what I'm getting at here is that far from being a mere playing out of reproductive instincts, sexuality and ideas about sex shift and change across space and time. Proof of this is I want you to think about the number of things that we find perfectly normal that would have been extremely shocking sexually some 50 years ago. Not that hard to do, right? Yeah, think of... Okay, so as a reminder, 100 years ago, medical doctors here in Switzerland and in France and lots of other places were performing clitoridectomy, so the cutting out of the clitoris, okay, to treat hysteria. Hysteria was considered a mental affliction, and now it's just seen as the expression of women's rebelling against their infantilized position in society, or simply their sexual frustration. All right, so just think of how things have changed since that position 100 years ago. Or think of things like places in the world where polygamy is perfectly legal, normal, accepted behavior, and how shocking this would seem to us. Okay, so space does change things. And this is a rather sad example, but I believe that it's an important example to give. In Uganda today, if you were gay, you risk being sentenced to life in prison. All right? Yeah, I see some shocked faces like, whoa, yes, that's true. So it just goes to show that ideas about sex and what's normal and what's not, what's desired and what's perverse, are extremely different from one place to another and across time, okay? So it can bring us to this conclusion that sex and sexualities are a complex intertwining of biological, so bodily responses that are mediated by the cultural, social, and personal experience. So what is considered perverse and normal depends largely on the context it's in. Now, I just want to take a moment here and say, what I'm not saying here is that everything is relative and therefore everything is acceptable. I'm not saying that, okay? I just want you to remember that one of the things that I was saying about sex positivity is that one of the key values is consent and personal choice, all right? Within that, there's room for discussion. So, I want you to come back in your minds to what we were saying about sex and gender-related violence and shaming. They come from the assumption that a certain gender or certain sex is entitled to dominate other or other genders. They come from the assumption that certain sexual acts are more normal or good than others, all right? And because of ideas such as sexual scripts, we can now realize that there's no reason behind this shaming, and it needs to stop. Realizing that these ideas about what is good or bad, realizing that they are largely cultural, makes it possible for us to change how we think about sex, how we talk about sex, and ultimately how we have sex. And all this makes it possible for people to make choices about what they want to live. And it allows us to be free to explore ourselves and one another, to love ourselves and each other, and to give each other pleasure. Now, I just want to come back to what I was saying at the very beginning, how in 2012, my brother and I decided to found a festival, a sex-positive festival, and why we're doing that. The reason why we do that is because we realized that in our society, sex is everywhere. But sex is everywhere in advertisement. Okay, sex is used to sell us things. That kind of sex is everywhere. But there's this odd thing where sex is everywhere, but the shaming and the violence that's connected with sex and gender continues. And the reason for that is because we are in this illusion that we know about sex, but there is no place for us to come together and think about sex collectively, meet each other, talk to each other, and confront our ideas. And that is what we wanted to do with La Fête du Slip. Thank you.
Right, let's start with the questions. Raise your hands if you have questions. Don't be shy. We can ask her, I think, absolutely everything.
Yes.
Question.
When you created this festival, I've been there this year, by the way. I just discovered this year it was existing, but I was like, oh my god, there are so many things to discover. Well, I'm sure, well, maybe not you found some obstacles, maybe by the government, or was it difficult to found this festival?
Well, it was and it wasn't. We are extremely lucky in the sense that the people that we approached for venues, for example, were extremely enthusiastic about our project. We have a number of volunteers that come and help us, and people that come in and work with us year-round for free. That is just overwhelming. It's amazing. We really feel the love, and that's great. What has been extremely difficult is the financial issues. For some reason, you would think that it's easy to make money with sex. Not so when you're not selling it. So finding money when you're trying to talk about sex positively is actually very, very difficult. But that's the only obstacle that we have come across so far. We've had great performers, great directors, great people that have come in. We've even had people come on their own expenses from New York just to be a part of our event. So no, we're really feeling the love, not really the money.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Nice talk, by the way. Thanks.
Thank you.
At some point, you challenged the idea that sex is not natural, but I couldn't catch the rationale behind that. So maybe it's me, but if you could just elaborate.
Sure, of course. I know that it's quite dense, what I said. Basically, I think it's important to challenge that idea because a lot of the, let's say, justifications or a lot of the arguments that are given to say, oh, sex is okay, right? Sex is not that bad or horrible or dangerous, is saying sex is a natural pulsion. Okay, so far you follow me? I'm looking at your eyebrows, that's why I'm, okay. And so I think it's interesting to think that sex is not only biological, it's also a number of biological things that are mediated, interpreted, perceived through culture and through personal experience and through social position. And to realize that a lot of what we consider to be relevant or good has to do with culture and not with biology. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so what, in essence, what you're saying is that our interpretation of sex is not natural.
Yes.
But the act itself is natural. I mean, the things you mentioned, kissing, petting, all this is biological. I mean, there are studies which indicate that kissing is one way of natural selection to see if the fluid exchange is working. It's not my theory. I read it in a study somewhere. So that's the first step to see if you have a suitable partner or not. The final idea being reproduction and natural selection. So I would say all those steps are more or less natural, including the ejaculation and the end.
Yes, they're all bodily functions or bodily expressions of something, and in that sense I agree that they are natural. They're not artificial, let's put it that way. However, the thing about kissing being something that's part of natural selection, I think that that is possible in certain cultural contexts, but I think it's also interesting to realize, and this comes from Simon and Gagnon's research, is that, for example, kissing has a very different role sexually and socially in different countries. Now, for example, this is changing with our more and more globalized world we live in. Okay, so obviously things are getting to be more and more uniform. But for example, some 100 years ago, kissing, for example, in China was considered to be absolutely disgusting. Why would you do that? Ooh, gross. And the way in which the let's say the parts that I exposed of a Western sexual script will not have that same order depending on societies. And I think that that's very interesting. There may be the same parts, but they won't be assembled in the same way. And for example, let's say, to come back to my example in China, kissing may not have been a part of that at all. And it's also something that we find absolutely, it's like, of course, I mean, I want to kiss someone. But I think it's interesting to realize that that's actually more cultural than we imagine it to be. And that maybe people didn't do that. Maybe in the Middle Ages, think of people's teeth and their dental hygiene. Maybe kissing wasn't all that, you know? And for us, it's easy because we brush our teeth and we have nice breath. Kissing, interesting experience. Do you get what I'm coming at?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Another question here.
Hi. I also was at La Fête du Slip this year.
Wonderful.
And I think it's a great event. I have a question related a little bit to the Fête du Slip intention to be
Sure.
the toutes les sexualités. And I was wondering if you think you're able to cross, let's say, categories of people attending events, because when you're showing the Ugandan gay situation or you're doing something related to lesbians, do you think in the room you do manage to get to people who normally would not go to events because they're associated to gay associations? That are you able to cross the boundaries? Because there are many events where, I mean, this movie was shown in Geneva, or it's going to be shown in the Gay and Lesbian Movie Festival, but obviously you would expect that most of the people in the room have some sort of sensibilities towards those topics. Are you able in the festival to go beyond in the public those mental boundaries?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think that we are able to do that to a certain extent, not as much as we would like to. But I believe that, I mean, of course, when we host an event around, let's say we did one on lesbian sexual health, well, obviously the people that are interested in that generally are concerned directly. But I was very happily and surprised to see that guys were there. So you think, oh, okay, well, at least, well, maybe, and I'm going to remain open here, maybe guys can identify as lesbian. I'm not against that idea. But I think it's really interesting because I wasn't expecting that, and it challenged my way of looking at things. And I was there, and I'm not a lesbian, so yes, I think that's possible. I think that what we really try to do with our festival is not brand it as, I don't know, LGBT or feminist or, you know, whatever. We really tried to just say, hey, it's sex positive. Anybody can come. Nothing bad will happen to you. Don't be shy. Don't be scared. It's going to be okay. But of course, obviously, most people who attend are somehow interested by what we do. We don't force anyone to come. But hopefully you are here and you will add to our growing public and come.
I'd like to thank you for the talk this morning. I have a small question. You during the talk and just right now you said like, okay, some people are heterosexual, some people are lesbian or gay. During the talk you say, oh, for the men who are heterosexual in the audience, but is the way of putting labels and categories to people another form of violence, because people then have to identify as heterosexual, have to identify as gay, and some people are in between. Or I think it's more fluid than that. And the labeling itself can be a form of, like, I have to fit in a box.
Thank you for that question. Yes. I agree that categorizing is a very limiting device, and I wish we could do without it. Unfortunately, it's something that we are forced to do as humans, because in order to be able to understand the world, we have to put names on things, but I wish that that wasn't necessary. And I agree with you that I think that putting people into little boxes is limiting and negative. I guess the only thing that I can say to kind of lessen that negative side is that I believe that everybody should be able to categorize themselves. And that's why I say that if a guy shows up and says, I'm a lesbian, I'm gonna be surprised, of course, because that doesn't go with what I have in my mind, but I'd be open to that. Do you understand? Is to go, hey, you define yourself however you want to define yourself. But I still do think that even if we are all free to define ourselves the way we want to, who we are or who society sees us as, because there's also that in our identity is who we define ourselves to be, but how people recognize who we are and what we do with that. And I think that depending on who you are in society, your experience of life can be very, very different. And so there is that to take into account as well, and it's a very complex question. So I can't answer it in full because we could write a doctorate thesis on this. But yeah, I agree. I agree that categorizing people is a very limiting thing to do.
Two quick points. The first being that you made some attempt to place your discourse in terms of a cultural and a historical perspective, but at no point did you touch on the topic of religion. My question is why? Surely it's relevant to this discourse. And two, my second point is I wasn't quite clear where you're leading, but the image that I got, my point would be, hasn't this evolution/revolution in terms of regards an approach to sexualities already happened in places like London, New York, and is happening across the globe in young, dynamic, educated societies?
Thank you. So I'm going to take the first question and then the second. I could have spoken about religion in my talk, absolutely. There are so many things I could have talked about, so I was trying to kind of zoom into a certain specific aspect. For those, the few people who came to our festival at this edition know that religion and religious ideas is something that we're very interested in and that we think about and deal with a lot. And I guess I didn't talk about religion specifically because to me, religion is something that can be kind of englobed into cultural aspects. Of course, you can see religion as something being different from cultural aspects, but that would be a personal relationship to religion. So that's why I didn't talk about it specifically. And I also think that a lot of times we think of religion as, ooh, the bad thing that's keeping us from living our free sexual lives, when I'm not really sure that that's actually true. There are many, many things that keep us from living free sexual lives, and I'm not sure that religion is the worst. So that's an answer to your first question. And then the second thing, yes, I believe that there is a movement that is in march, and I believe that things are changing. They are changing, and they have started changing, and they started changing a long time ago. But I still believe, and I still see that I'm surprised at how little people know, how little people actually think about themselves and their relationship to sex, or how they judge other people. And it can be in little small things. Like, I'm going to take an example. I have a friend who works in the cinema industry, and a lot of times he'll come back and say, did you know that such and such a director is gay? And I'm like, who cares? Why is that important? Why are you not coming and telling me, did you know that such and such is straight? That never happens, right? Or people don't ask you, so when did you start realizing that you were interested in people of the opposite sex? Doesn't happen. Okay, and there's this bias, and I think that we often think that things have changed considerably, and they have to a certain extent, but there's still a long way to go, and that's what we're pushing towards. So I don't know if that answers both of your questions. Thank you. There's somebody in the back. Oh, sorry.
We have seen together how things have changed since 100 years, and I would like to ask you, how do you see us in another 100 years? How do you see the future of sexuality for the humanity?
Unfortunately, my name is Viviane and not Irma.
Okay.
I don't have a glass crystal ball. I can tell you what I hope for. I hope for a world where people are comfortable talking about sex, where we don't have to have conferences and festivals. Maybe to answer your question, somebody asked me, I realized that sex festivals are the new big thing. So what are you going to do in 10 years when everybody's doing a sex festival? And I said, you know what? I would love to not have to do this. I would love for sex to be such a normal, obvious, everyday subject that we don't have to have a festival. It's just, yeah, sure, of course, obvious. And I guess that's what I hope for. I hope for a future where people stop shaming each other and themselves because of sex or gender, and where, as you were pointing out, people can categorize themselves however they want, inside obviously consent and personal choice and health issues, but where people can do that freely and it's okay. That's what I hope for. So I hope that we will not have conferences about sex in 100 years.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little bit on what you said earlier about the did you know that X or Y is gay? Making that kind of comment, if it's not judgmental, if it's not negative, can be very okay. If I come and say, did you know that Arthur Rimbaud was a junkie? it's very important if you want to analyze his works, his writings. If you come to me and say, or if I come to you and say, did you know that this director is gay, that might help analyze some of his movies. So it's more a question of how you put it. If you come and say it as a gossip that's going to sort of tag a value on the person, then you shouldn't do it, obviously, and who cares, right? Now, if it's somebody who's in the movie industry and who's used to commenting the movies he goes and sees or analyzing them because it's his passion, or her passion, who cares, then it can be actually very important. Just the same way as if somebody comes to me and say, did you know that this director is Iranian? Well, yeah, the kites in, where is it called, what, Kabul,
Kites in Kabul, yeah.
It's really important to know where the person comes from, even if it's not, you know.
Absolutely.
On average, who cares?
The example that I was giving was gossip, but I think that's an important point. Obviously, and that's kind of what my talk was about, I believe that context is super important. And to realize where people are coming from to say what they're saying is hugely important. We need to know, because we need to know that people are not objective and they're subjective, and there's nothing that they can do about that. That's what it's like to be a human being. We all come from places and experiences and cultures and societies and different experiences that we need to take into account to say, this is what I'm saying, this is why I believe what I believe. So yes, I believe that like I teach literature, so obviously I think that, you know, knowing that such and such a writer is Afro-American or even gay is very important, because it's going to structure how we read what that person is writing and understand it.
It's what you said about putting tags on people. It's okay, it's important. We need to do it as long as we understand that a tag is a limitation in our way of looking at something.
Exactly.
And
I couldn't
we
put
might
it better.
want or need to put multiple tags on somebody or something, actually.
Yes.
Your sign is green, and it's also 4x3.
Absolutely. We can describe things. There's an example that I really, really like. It's not by me. It's Umberto Eco, who I really love, who talks about, in a series of essays called Kant and the Platypus. And he says this thing. He says, well, when the scientists discovered the platypus, who had been living his life, you know, free of any worries or troubles before that, they came and said, oh, look at this strange animal. It's part mammal, but it lays eggs. That's weird. And instead of putting into question their own typographies, their own different ways of categorizing the world, they said, no, that animal's weird. And we do that all the time. And I think it's really interesting and important to remember that the little boxes that we make the world of are just that, little boxes. And sure, you know, a mammal is usually a very useful box, okay? But not always. And it's, yes, we need these things to describe the world. But I think it's important to remember that they're just a grid. They're just, you know, our way of partitioning the world to understand it, and nothing more than that. So remember, Kant and the platypus, useful example.
Somebody will have different boxes than us.
Exactly, exactly, and that's a great thing. And every time we come across somebody who has a different way of seeing the world, it's like a slap in the face, and you go, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. And I love that. That's the reason that inspires me to keep on learning and keep on doing things, inside or outside of the question of sex.
Do we have one last question? Anyone? Yes.
I have the impression that sex was more free 30, 40 years ago in here in Europe or in the US than now. How do you explain that? And how also the more we see sex everywhere in the society, and the less I have the impression also that that sex is normal. I have the impression that it's in the late 60s, beginning of in the 70s, it was something very more natural than it is today. And I think it's very strange for me.
I obviously have an opinion on this, and it's nothing but my opinion. So I just want to say that I haven't studied this extensively. I'm not doing research on this, so it's just my personal opinion. But I agree with that diagnosis. I think it's very strange how in the 60s and 70s, sexual revolution, boom, throw away your bras and everything, and things go kind of crazy. And then we're here now, and it feels like we've gone backwards. I guess my own interpretation of that is because we live in a society where people file lawsuits, for example, much more than they used to. The question of legal rights and the protection of, let's say, children is something that's more and more important, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But I do think that all things being connected, sometimes things going forward in certain fields means that we're going backwards in another. And it's sometimes difficult to negotiate how those two things work together, billions of things work together. I also think that the reason why things have gone backwards is because collectively we assumed that we had gotten somewhere, and then we stopped working on it. Kind of go, oh, we're free, yippee, and then kind of went, okay, well, we don't need to work on this anymore. And I think that's a mistake. I think that we need to continuously, and to come back to this idea of little boxes, that the grid that we have in our minds to interpret the world. I think it's important to remember that that grid is always there and is always going to come back. We're always going to go back to that idea of, this is how I interpret the world. This is how I see it, because it's comfortable, it's reassuring, it's what allows us to understand things. And if we don't watch out, those ideas come back really fast, or we just get stuck in, okay, now I understand this way. Stop asking questions about it. And it's important to continually remind ourselves that we need to transgress these little borders. We need to kind of go over and explore that liminal space, and to ask ourselves, what am I getting stuck into here? And I think that's part of it. But then again, that's my humble opinion on the thing, on that question.
Thank you. So, any other questions that you would like to ask? Oh yeah, another one. Another one? Run.
Well, I was wondering about the people who join this kind of like sex positive attitude, whether they just like close themselves into a sort of closed group. Because I've run some groups as well, and the feeling that I had was that it was nice to be in the group, to talk about sex positivity, to be in places like this, and then you have the outside world in which you have to a little bit to hide, and most of the people are not out. They come with they don't want to show their names and so on. So, and then you have like the feeling that you are in a sort of ghetto. So I'm wondering what are the best strategies to put these things to the big public and to show this sex positivity to the outside world in order to let people be more out about this.
Personally, I see what you're talking about. Personally, I kind of sometimes I wish that I had this sex positive bubble and all these people around me who agreed with me. That's not the case. For example, I think that it's interesting just in the people that help to organize our festival, that are part of our committee. The reason why they're a part of our organization is extremely different for each person, and we don't all agree with each other. We actually have very different views on different subjects such as pornography or women's rights or a lot of things, and we disagree, and I think that's a very positive, useful thing because it keeps us from being in that bubble and kind of thinking, oh, we're cool and everybody else is just wrong about the world. That's not how it happens. And the second thing is, I believe that it's very, very important to be out, as you say. My real name is Viviane Morey. That's the name my parents gave me. I'm a high school teacher. All of my students know what I do. Their parents know, my bosses know. People that work with me in my school actually participate in my festival. They come and do readings or, finance it, and I think that's great. And so I think that maybe just a part of that is being open. How can I talk about sex positivity if I'm not willing to say, hey, my name's Viviane Morey, and I organize a sex positive festival. If I wasn't able to do that, that would be kind of scary, actually. So if other people don't want to talk about sex, that's fine by me. I don't think everybody should go around talking about sex if they're not comfortable with that. But if you are going to have that position, I think it's very important to be honest and say, this is who I really am, and put yourself out there. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So, yeah. I guess that's my answer.
And I think there's just one short one. Somebody wants to ask something.
Thanks.
You again.
Yes, maybe. Well, we spoke about the revolution that's underway and all that. My question is, here in Switzerland, where are we in terms of this revolution? Do you have any thoughts?
No. That's a complicated question. Every year when we do our festival, we have to come up with a report to give back to the people who finance us, for example. The few people, courageous people who do. And it's kind of very hard to come up with results, I guess. For me, the result is that people come to our festival. The result is you're here this morning. You're coming here and we're talking about it together. That's part of the result. And I don't think it's something that we're going to be able to measure in statistics and things like that. Not quite yet. Hopefully in the future. But I think that just things like this is part of what I would call the result.
Thank you, Viviane.
My pleasure, thank you.